Okay. Let's get this guy going too. Yeah, okay. So what happened was like this. The Rambam in the Kedam D'Chilei Gimel, which we're going to focus on one aspect which we touched upon in the first year, and I want to try to figure it out. The Rambam goes like this. Of course, he's writing to, in a certain sense, like the whole Sefer, but explicitly in this introduction, he's writing to one individual, the main addressee of the Nevuchim, who is Yosef ben Yehudah ibn Shimon. That the Nevuchim begins with a letter to him. That's all the way in the beginning. In the letter, he goes like this. The letter goes, "You came to learn by me. After I had heard about you, I read your poems and I was impressed by them, but I wasn't sure whether your intellect is as great as your desire to learn. And then we studied together. I directed you, I guided you to certain secrets. You wanted to know more, and I was leading you to the secrets of the Torah, but it was important to me that you get there in the right order. And then when Hashem decreed that you should leave me," I'm paraphrasing the introduction to the letter to the Talmud, all the way to the beginning. "When Hashem decreed that we should separate, that you should go on your way, I resolved to do something which had been an idea that I had, which I had abandoned, or which I hadn't followed up on, which is to write these things down, because you're not here anymore, right? And how are you going to know these things? How am I going to teach you?" So we have the same, now back to the Kedam D'Chilei Gimel, we have the same thing, where the Rambam writes that I discovered these secrets of Ma'aseh Merkava. And if I don't write them down, then they're going to disappear from people's knowledge when I, the Rambam, dies. That's what it says over here. So, as we mentioned in the first year, he's suggesting that he has no one to teach it to orally. So that's because this Talmud is separated from him, as we learned from the letter to the Talmud all the way at the beginning of the Nevuchim, that originally he taught it in Pel Peh, but then the Talmud they had to separate, so he had to write it down. So here he writes, look, I have these big secrets, which if I don't write it down, they're going to disappear when I die. Why? Because this Talmud is not here. And apparently, furthermore, there's no one else. The only person, at least in the Rambam's orbit, or oral orbit, that he can speak to, the only one who we ever had that might be the candidate for being his Talmud is this obscure person, relatively obscure. He's famous basically for being the Rambam's, not even Talmud, sort of. He's famous for being the one that he wrote the Nevuchim to. More than that, we know something, which we'll get to soon. But this person is a very critical person. This is the only person that the Rambam, that's what it suggests. He says, look, if I don't write this to you, it's going to disappear when I die. Why? Okay, because he's not here, you're not here in Egypt. And there's apparently no one else around that qualifies for oral receipt of the secrets, of being the student of the Rambam. That's what you state. Yeah? Okay. So, why don't you just take a look? You should take a look at the letter which I paraphrased, the letter to the Talmud. That's called the Geras El Talmud, all the way in the beginning of Nevuchim. You just take a look. So I paraphrased it, and the point I want to bring out is that in that letter, we see that, as Rambam says, because you came to me, it's all the way to the beginning, even before that. To go back all the way to the beginning. No, I'm probably not there. Whatever, you'll find it if you want. Anyways, yeah, think about this. It's a very interesting thing, because what happens in the letter is like this. Rambam says, you came to study by me, and I was telling you this and that, and you wanted more. And then you had to leave, so I decided to write this book, which was an idea that had been percolating, whatever. Which means that this book was written, Rambam says the book was written for two reasons. Number one, it took a Talmud coming to him and learning with him orally, and he found his Talmud. It took that. He wouldn't have written the book otherwise. This is the background to the book. Is you came to me, you studied by me, and then you departed, so I decided to write it. in an alternative universe where this Talmud never discovered the Rambam, they never studied together Perplexed, the Rambam would not have written the Mishneh Torah. That's what's mashma. That's what we see from there. And we also see from here that there's no one else. The Rambam couldn't find anyone else. This is the one. Okay? Yeah, these are the two things we learned, which I want to understand a little better. The fact that there was no one else. Okay, there was no one else. Fine, kacha. Maybe it doesn't need a hezbollah. But we see more than that. Number one, there's no one else that could be the Talmud. And number two, the impetus for writing this book is this Talmud. Even though he says explicitly in the letter over there, he says it's for you and for people like you. It's not that he thinks there's no one else who can understand the Nevuchim. There's people in that category, that kind of person. But he needed a live person to be the catalyst. And the catalyst was we studied together, but then you left, and then I'm writing this book. And there's only one person that can serve that function in his orbit, and that is R Yosef Yehudah ibn Shimon. As I state, yeah? So far so good? Now, there's a very fascinating thing about this fellow, which is that the Rambam's other major work, Mishneh Torah, we find the exact same thing. Both of these aspects. That it's important that he has this one Talmud, and that he's the only one. So it goes like this. There was a machlokes about a polmis about the Mishneh Torah. There was opposition to the Mishneh Torah, most notably coming from Reb Shmuel ben Eli, yeshiva in Baghdad, who apparently had like a huge yeshiva, 1,000 talmidim or something. The Rambam had this one Talmud, see. And but we only know Reb Shmuel ben Eli, basically because of the machlokes of the Rambam, which is interesting. But anyways, massive machlokes about the Mishneh Torah. And the Talmud, R Yehudah ibn Shimon, this Talmud of the Rambam, was in the middle of it. I think he was living in Baghdad or something, and he was defending Rambam's honor. And he was very vocal about defending the Rambam's honor. He was very angry at these chevra, these mechubadim, these rabbanim, shivas that were saying things about the Rambam, and he would fight with them. Okay? And so I want to tell you, there's a bunch of letters from the Rambam to Rabbi Yosef about this matter. Whether it's actually one letter that was just broken into pieces, or it's a bunch of letters, I see Shilas says, I'm not sure about that. So I'm just going to treat them all as one unit. I didn't have enough time to figure out if one precedes the other. I'm going to quote various things from those letters, and you'll see how they have a lot of bearing on the Nevuchim too. And we'll just treat it like one big shmooze. And it might actually be one big shmooze. One thing the Rambam writes is the following. He says like this. He says, he tells him like this. He tells his son, he calls him my son. He tells his son, basically, cool it. You're young, and you're not able to be civil, affronts to my honor. But I'm already older, and I have experience, and I know that I'm like my covet, and you should be like that too. That is like this. I wrote the Mishneh Torah not for covet. Okay? First of all, you should know it's not for covet. Don't worry about it. Don't worry if people don't like it. I didn't write it to be popular. Secondly, I knew when I wrote it, I knew that people are going to be mekane and going to be meganet. And it's going to fall in the hands of fools who don't understand it, and to beginners who will have kashas. And simple people that are going to be upset by my things I say about Yisod Emun. I knew all this is going to happen. That's the roiv. It's also going to fall into the hands of the special elite people who are Anshe Yosher, Tzedek, and Good Seichel. They're going to know the value of what I've done. Asher, Atahu Harishin Mehem. You're the first. Va'afilu lo yeh li b'yamai zulascha daili. Even if in my whole life there's no one else but for you, that's sufficient. Okay? But you should know everything I told you about people not going to accept the Mishneh Torah, that's only when I'm alive. When it's no longer personal, everyone's only going to use Mishneh Torah and they're not going to use any other sefer. I didn't happen. By the way, I have a pshat. See, it's nifl. It might be, we might have a pshat why that didn't happen. Okay? So he says like this. So first of all, he says, you're the first one to really get it. And he also says there's no one else. And it might be no one else, but there might be only one person when I'm alive. But that's okay. So we learned confirms what we have in the Moreh Nevuchim, that there's no one else, but it's important that there be one person, right? Because he says if only one person, it's enough. But if there's not one person, that's not enough. There's 0 people when he's alive, that's not good. That's not okay. If there's one person when he's alive, that's okay, because eventually, when it's no longer personal, then the island's going to treat it and understand it as they should, because there's not going to be any surah involved. Yeah, clear? Okay. So I want to understand like this. I want to explain why it's important that there be one Talmud. Aside from Mishneh Torah. Now we have something to mind for this, right? We have in the Moreh Nevuchim, okay, there's one Talmud that he started teaching about Peh, and then when they separated, he said, I'm going to write it to you. Even though the book is not only written for him, it's written for anyone, but the Rambam would not have written it if not for that one Talmud. And now that Talmud is not Peh, so he has to write it B'chsav. And similarly, we have that from Mishneh Torah. He says, you're the first one to get it. There may not be anyone else when I'm alive, and that's okay. It's enough that there's one, not 0, but one, and eventually everyone's going to get it. So that's a mucker to try to figure out why is it important that there's one Talmud. Good? So I want to explain that. And then I want to get to the question of whether the Talmud, did he live up to his role? Remember last week we discussed, the Rambam says to him, in the Hakdamah to Chelik Gimel, he says, this is the Pshat in that Chazal, that you'll know if you are from the Mevinim. And I'm going to show you now that, and there's another suffix here in the Hakdamah to Chelik Gimel. Rambam says, if I don't teach it to you, I'm either stealing from you or I'm begrudging you your inheritance. So the suffix about the status of the Talmud, which I won't go into. I don't know whether what we're going to discuss tonight bears on that, but there's some doubt about the Talmud. And now we're going to see that the Talmud maybe didn't live up to what the Rambam needed from him. Rambam needs to have one Talmud. He needs to have one Talmud for the Mishneh Torah to be a success, which remember, it wasn't the success that the Rambam was certain that it would be. He's only certain if his Talmud reads these letters well, which we're going to do, and lives according to these letters, and you'll see it's something that Talmud may have not done. And he also needs the Talmud for the Moreh Nevuchim. He needs to have had this meeting with the Talmud where he learned with him Perplexed, and then he's going to write the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay? Listen to this. Okay? Listen to this amazing thing. So this is in one of the letters where the Rambam's telling him like this. He says, I know you love me. Apparently the Talmud was Musupik. He seems to have thought that the Rambam questions his love, the Talmud's love for the Rambam. The Rambam starts the letter saying, I know your love for your father, again he calls him the father, is true. And the fact that you think I'm not sure about it, it's not. Of course, I know that. Fine. So there's some tension. Now listen to this. Again, he's telling him, he says like this, he says, I want you to know, me, I do everything that's unlawful, even if people will hold it against me. Even if the Hamoin even if it's going to lower me by the Hamoin, I stick to undishonest. Okay? Anyone who wants to use my chesaron to show his own shleimus, gesundheit. Afilu miktani atamidim machalnu loy bezeh. So even if people abuse me, says the Rambam, my mahalach is that even if I'll take abuse, it's okay. Okay? Someone wants to act yasher, fine. If not, also fine. Now listen to this. I'm going to read it twice, and then I'm going to pass it around because you have to see this lashon. He's sticking with third person. I told you face to face, if you remember. If these days, if a person will commit, will decide, to do or to speak to every person according to the way that person does to him. These days, if a person would live according to that mantra, that okay, I treat people as they treat me, which is a pasuk, you're going to end up becoming an evil person. Everyone you see is Nikesh. Remember the Rambam's rule that you are as you act. So even though that's the Rambam's rule, the only way to change your midas is by actions. So even though there's a reason, there's a logic to treating everyone as they treat you, but everyone treats people awfully. So if you're going to say, well, I only treat people as they treat me, you're going to become a bad person. If you want to be a human being, and not to have bad midas and be a behemoth, you should think about your mashim midas, and kinyan seichel al yasik dato be shtuyos. Say bishtuyot. Sounds bad. Okay, so I'm going to read it again. Kvar daitiv ponim beponim ehu zeicher. She'adam im yaskim bazenu ze lasis eloim kfi gvon kolod b'chamois ma'asav k'mo shenam mikish titapol yikva b'nafsh ze kinyan nikva b'chom min herois lefi sheroiv mi sheroiv hu ikesh im kin roiv lodem shroitz lias on shestak b'shlamos midasov yikinyan sich liasov al yasik da'ato b'shtuyot. Now, if anyone wants to look at inside, here it is. Okay? So, I told you this face to face, if you remember. Yeah, I have a lot of questions about this. Why is it important that he told him face to face? Why is he mentioning I told you face to face? Why does he say if you remember? If the Rambam told his start, if Rambam told me this part, it's huge yesod. Hagam is the pasuk in Mishneh. It says in Mikish Titapol. These days we're not knowing that way because there's too many ikshim. Mordek yesod. Shemach havak a pasuk. It's a Rosh whatever. He's oiker pasuk. And I'm not sure if you remember. Start Talmud. What's going on with this? Huh? Mm-hmm. It's a dig. It's a dig that maybe you don't remember this. This you say. Let me read another passage and you'll see that he's not so sure about his Talmud anymore. Because in another passage in Zilaz, he tells him like this. And he writes him imcha. Im ato talmidi shetelech bidrachai nelovim veinam olvim and al taver al daiti b'shum ponim. He gets very sharp with him. He's very upset that the Talmud is not active. This is a little bit of a steer because in one place he tells him, "You're young. I was also like that when I was young." You don't think he tells him. He says, "When I was young, I was worse than you." So it's a little steer. But here he tells him, "Klolish adavar," and he writes mimcha im ato talmidi. So he's mesuvik if he's his Talmud. Why is he mesuvik if he's his Talmud? Because he's not acting as he's acting, which is to be in love with him. So that's why he says, if you remember this, it's a dig. Like, oh, maybe you forgot this important teaching. Okay, so that's one aspect of the imat hazaycher. But why does he mention that as panim b'panim? Okay, now here's something crazy. Look at, I think we mentioned this year. We mentioned this in the first year. Look at Chela Gimel Perak Mem Gimel in the Moyen Nevuchim. I'm sorry, Perak Mem Aleph. This is Tameh Mitzvahs. So if you're in the Mishneh Torah version, you're going to look at paragraph number 4. Okay. I'm reading it from the Schwartz edition. Tameh HaMitzvahs. Misha chiser ever, yechusa ever kamaisai. If someone makes someone lose a limb, he also has to lose a limb. Kasha yitim mumba adam kedi doesn't, and that is very fair. That the Rambam is going with this general approach to what's the word for this? Torts? Yeah? Is that as you do, so is done to you, and that's the time, right? So if a person gives a mum to a person, such happens to them too. That's not what we do. So what do you mean? Don't worry about the fact that you give me a time for Ein Tachzayin Mamish when we don't do that. Okay, so very important idea, whatever it means. The Tameh HaMitzvahs are Tamim for the Psukim, not Tamim for the Halacha. Okay? Pasuk says Ein Tachzayin. Of course, Ein Tachzayin literally means an eye for an eye. That's not the Halacha, that's not the intention of what we're supposed to do, whatever, but that's how the Pasuk expresses it, and Tameh HaMitzvahs for some reason follow how the Pasuk expresses. I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about the next line. Also, because I have something about this halacha, about Ayin Tachzayin, moment, that I'm going to tell you about Peh. And therefore that's going to help you understand why I'm giving a reason for Mamish. Now, what is this? Nobody knows. Mamish, nobody knows. What did the Rambam believe about Ayin Tachzayin that he's going to tell him up? And by the way, everyone just assumes automatically that the Rambam is not scared to write it, which the Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam just says, let's not make any assumptions here. The Rambam says, there's something that I have to tell you about Peh, and and that's going to have a bearing on the question of why am I giving a reason for Ayin Tachas Ayin Mamish that's not Kafir Allah. That's all the Rambam says. Yeah? Okay? Fine. Now, we mentioned in the first year, did Rambam ever meet this Talmud again? He tells him, I'm going to tell you something about Peh. In my seeds, the whole book was written because I'm not going to meet again. So I'm not sure what to make of this. But there's another reference to saying something Peh Panim Panim in the letter. The Rambam told the Talmud, I told you Panim Panim. What did he tell him? That we don't do Imikish Titapo. We don't treat people as they treat us. Why? Because too many people, too many ikshin. So now plug that in over here. It's nifla. Ayin Tachas Ayin Mamish. Of course, perfect, yeah? But what if everyone's a bunch of chayflim? So we're going to become awful people. It's a real problem. I'm not saying it's a real problem. I mean to say is like according to the Rambam's understanding means that's a legitimate issue. Now the Torah note says you can't do a Sisi Yashav Tayyip if you do a Mikish Titapol. You can't. Why? Because too many action. So there's too many. So that means you have to be oiker this mahalach of treating people as they treat you. I know the Rambam wrote that he told the Talmud this panim upon him, and therefore I think I found the key to understanding what is this thing that I'm going to tell you panim upon him. There's something he told panim upon him, and remember in both places he references I told you this panim upon him, and here he says I'm going to tell you about pet, which we have to bracket that. We have to figure out what that's about. But there's some teaching, a Torah about pet teaching for the Rambam to the Talmud, which is about sort of being oiker Torah shebechsav. That the Torah says Ayin Tachas Ayin, the Torah says a Mikish Titapol, but we can't do that.
This is the only thing that he says that?
Yeah, in the morning with me. Okay, good.
It doesn't fit in with Dhamma when he said they used to be, they had to say
Yeah.
used to have to do, so he's referring back to that they used to have to do. He throws that out. The next line says, no, I have to write it down.
Right. What they used to teach is about Peh, right?
No, but it's the same lesson.
Right. Right.
So he says, that's how I used to have to do it, but I'm throwing that out and writing it down now.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's reverting back to, okay, guess what? I did tell you certain things about Peh.
Some things. Some things need to be about Peh. In other words, right. But I'm drawing a parallel here, which I'm going to try to figure out, which is just like with the Talmud, to whom he writes his book. He only wrote it to him because they first started studying about Peh, right? So there is an element. You see that it's not true that Rambam said, "Look, we're not doing about Peh anymore. We're just writing." Because then, why is in the letter to the Talmud, which is like Dhamma to the Murray, he says, "First we learned together about Peh, but then you had to leave, so I decided to write the book." So write the book. We say that. No, we have to start with about Peh. So there is an element about Peh too, right? You see. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have to figure out what that is. So going back to the criticism, I mentioned like this. I mentioned that when the Rambam tells him, I told you this panim panim, if you remember. Of course he remembers. It's a way of saying, I'm not so sure you're acting as my Talmud. And as I told you, in this letter, he's very sharp with him, and he tells him, if you're my Talmud, you have to act like me. And stop taking these chevra so seriously. And remember, he tells him also, he's very sharp over there. He says, let's see another thing he says. He says, you're upset that he said such and such. You upset that he was screaming at you or something. Of course, he was insulted. Don't expect someone that you hurt that he should love you. Don't expect someone that you hurt to go love you. He really gives him shtak and musar here. And as I said, he says, in this letter, he says, if you're my Talmud, and he ends this letter, by the way, he tells him, don't stop writing to me. Because I have no better friend than you writing. Okay, don't stop writing to me. Because he's distancing him over here in this letter. And he tells him, I'm not sure you're my Talmud, basically, because you're not acting like me. Okay? But remember, it's very important that he has a Talmud. No, so that's why he ends it saying, okay, I still want you to write to me. Because I like your letters very much. Because this Talmud of his is not living up to what he wants. And what he wants from his Talmud is to be like him, which is not to do Imkikish Titap. Because we can't do that anymore. Okay? And remember the Rambam says also, he says, I, the Olam's Mekan in the Mishneh Torah, what are we going to do? That's only, and you're my only Talmud that I have, it's enough, it's fine, it's okay. It's okay, I have only one Talmud. Did I write the Mishneh Torah for one Talmud? No. But it's only about Kinah. And once the Kinah is gone, after I die, then everyone's going to accept this book. So just take it easy. Lay low. Don't respond. And eventually everything's going to work out, right? So I want to explain to you, I think, why it's very important for the Rambam that this Talmud should act like him. This is not just about Midas Titus. He says, if you're my Talmud, you have to do this. And I want to suggest that it doesn't just mean if you're my Talmud, in Midas, you have to act with my Midas. But it means to say, if you're my Talmud, who's necessary for my project. Remember, he has to have one Talmud. He has to have one Talmud from Rebuchim, Palpeh, and he has to have one Talmud from Mishneh Torah, B'chayev. And in order for that Talmud to function as the purpose of the Talmud, it's very important that the Talmud not do Imikish Tapel, that he act like the Rambam and not respond. I'll explain to you why. Let's understand what the Rambam is saying. The Rambam is saying like this, that he wrote this major work, beautiful work, Mishneh Torah, right? And it causes people to be jealous of him. They wouldn't be jealous if the Rambam was dead. He says eventually it's not going to be personal. But now they're jealous of the Rambam. Why are they jealous of the Rambam? Why are they afraid of the Rambam? Someone wrote a great work, so what? What?
Because there's someone to...
Yeah. He's greater than them, so what? So what? Why is that a threat? Well, it's very simple. Because they have bad midas. People who have bad midas assume that everyone has bad midas, and therefore they can't forgive that someone should be better than them. No one minds that a malach is better than them because the malach is not competing with them, right? But they're afraid the Rambam's not a malach. Really, the Rambam is a malach, but people don't know that. So again, if he has bad midas as they do, then it's natural for them to attempt to put him down. They have to repress this power that he attained by writing this great work, right? Yeah? But that's only when there's a personal element involved. Eventually, people will just look at the work and recognize its greatness without thinking about, the Rambam's better than me. What do you care if the Rambam's better than me? Rambam's dead. When the Rambam's alive, you care if the Rambam's better than you. Why? Because you think that the Rambam is going to lord it over you. Really, the Rambam doesn't care about anything. But you think that, right? Now, like this. So that's the Metzias. The Metzias is like this. The Metzias is he put out this great work, which is naturally going to cause people to try to take him down. And why are they going to try to take him down? Because they're afraid that the Rambam is going to be using his greatness against them. Of course, the Rambam would never do that, but people they assume that the Rambam would act just as they would. The Talmud maybe also has great midas, and maybe it's a wonderful midah to do a mikish titapel. But you know what happens if you do a mikish titapel? You get bad midas. You become like them, which will confirm that they were right for fighting against you, right? Because look, see, I told you he was a bad guy. Maisa, he only became a bad guy because you made it. You fight with someone, you drag him into the mud, and he becomes a mudslinger like you. And then you say, look, I knew it was right to take it. That's what happened. That's what could have happened. And then, I would suggest, the fight will never end. The fight will never end. You need to do the following. You need to lay low. Don't respond. So you don't get bad midas. So let them fight. No one's gonna respond to them, and then it's gonna die out. Eventually, I'll be gone. It's not gonna be personal anymore. And you never engage with them. You never confirm that they were right for trying to take it down. You never engage in the battle, and that way it could just blow over. Okay. So the Talmud acting that the Talmud shouldn't do a mikish titapel is not stam midas tayvis. Rambam is insistent that the Talmud to function as a Talmud. Now, what's the function of Talmud? The function of Talmud. Why do you need a Talmud? Why do you need one Talmud? The Rambam says, well, after I die, everyone's going to accept it, right? But there has to be one person who's going to be the bridge, who's going to engage with it b'chaya the Rambam. And the Rambam dies, and he's like, look, okay, now can we bring this out? Now can everyone start learning this? I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. But there has to be one person who understood the greatness, b'chaya the Rambam. So the Talmud has a function to be the bridge between the Rambam when there's a person. Yeah, people are very dangerous because everyone else assumes these terrible motives to people. So Ram's a person, he's also a malach, whatever. He also has a seichel. He's a person, so everyone thinks he's a bad person, because most people are bad. So male, they try to fight with him. And if Talmud is going to fight back, it's only going to confirm it, and the Meriva will never end, I think. That's I'm adding. That I think that a fight, that if you respond to the fight, even when it's no longer personal, it will already tend to take on its own kind of, it'll drag other people in. Next guy we have to fight. It'll be personal between, it'll be personal between the Talmud. That's the part. Right. Let's say the Talmud responds, right? So now it becomes personal for the Talmud. So even the Rambam's dead, it's not personal anymore, it's personal for the Talmud. You have already the Rambamists and the other chevra, the other camps. They became camps. So you can't become camps, you can't become anything, right? And then you Talmud will be my real Talmud, not just real Talmud in Midas, but you'll be the Talmud who actually serves as the necessary one person to serve as the neutral bridge between my life and after my life. Okay? You get the shtickle Torah? So made like this. The Rambam can't write a Mer Nevuchim without a Talmud. Meaning without him first coming Pal Peh and having a relationship with his Rebbe of a Talmud, he has to first have that. The same way for the Mishneh Torah, you have to first have a Talmud, means somebody you could talk to, can engage with. You first have to have that kind of relationship, such that even though everyone's going to fight with you, because everyone fights with everything, because any new thing that comes up, the first thing everyone does is fight with it. So the only time new things work is after the principles of who introduced it are no longer here. So we take the personal element out, as I stated in Rambam. So it's very important to have a Talmud. Not just because you want a Talmud, because your book won't last. Your book won't get from here to there unless it's at the bridge, unless it's a Talmud. So therefore, he's not going to stamzeh write the Mer Nevuchim. He has to first find there was a Talmud who has a major function. There's one Talmud. Finally, you found this one guy, Yosef ibn Shimon. He's the man. And it's very important that there be such a person, because otherwise the fights will never end and the book will never succeed. Which is what I said before. The Rambam says that the Mishneh Torah is going to succeed and everyone's going to accept it. It didn't happen because I don't know what the Talmud is. He says, I'm not sure if you're my Talmud. And he tells him, keep writing to me. I like your letters. He also says a very interesting lesson. He says, I have no better friend than your letters. Your friend, or maybe he's not really Talmud. He's like, oh, I still like you. Still my friend. But he's imata talmidi, and here in the introduction he says imata. There's a lot of fakers about this Talmud, but the Talmud is playing a crucial role, which he may or may not have played. And so, in other words, just to be very clear, my theory about why the Mishneh Torah wasn't accepted is because the Rambam says that Mishneh Torah is such a good work that the only reason the person wouldn't accept it is because they have kinah. And when I'm gone, people won't have kinah anymore. And they won't learn anything else. People still haven't recognized that. What did the Rambam not know? Ted says, look at that letter. He's training the Talmud to play a certain role, which is not to fan the flames of kinah and not to confirm that their kinah is right by becoming like them. And you better do this, and I need you to do this. And if you're my Talmud, this is what you're going to do. So I don't know if the Talmud did that. And in that context, Rambam says, and everything's going to work out. But not if the Talmud's not a Talmud. He needs to have one Talmud. He says, you're the first one, and die bazeh. But not die with less than that, and less than that. And I don't know if the Talmud lived up to it. Okay? Now, let's go back to Ayin Tachazai. The Rambam says like this. The Rambam tells, going back to Chelik Gimel Perek, he tells him like this. I'm going to give you the reason for Ayin Tachazai Mamish. Ayin Tachazai is not Mamish at the moment. First of all, I'm giving reasons for Psukim. Second of all, there's something I have to say about that, which I'm going to tell you Pal Peh. So now, what's significant about the fact that it's Pal Peh, right? Same thing in the letter. He says, I told you this var to panim b'panim. Remember there, it doesn't mean I'm not going to write it down, because he wrote it down. In the letter, he wrote it down. It's just, but he references, I told it to you panim b'panim. Okay, why is it significant that there's some idea that's panim b'panim? So now, talking about the letter. Why is it significant that there was this var to panim b'panim? Because the way he becomes this Talmud, the Talmud is panim b'panim. And he says, I told you this panim b'panim if you remember. If you remember is a way of saying, I'm not sure whether you're a good Talmud or not, right? Panim b'panim is saying, look, you were selected to be my Talmud. Panim b'panim. We had a relationship. And your role, in order to live up to your function, which started with a panim b'panim relationship, you must not do imikish ditapel. That's the critical thing. Imato zoiche. So when Rambam says we met panim panim, I told you about panim panim. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't, and it's this. What he's saying is like this: me and you, we had a panim panim relationship. You became my talmid, and in order for you to function as the role of the Rambam's talmid, you have to be neutral, and you're not, which makes me suggest that you're not remembering what you're supposed to be. It's like not just I told you about panim panim, maybe you remember. It's also you're not living up to the panim panim that you're my talmid. Now, when he says, now what this suggests to follow. When he says by ayin tachas ayin, I'm telling you pshan ayin tachas ayin mamish, it's momin, I have something to say about that which I'll tell you panim panim. I always recognized that the fact that the Rambam is saying that there's something I'm going to tell you panim panim is not just tam effect, zaitik effect. It bears on the question of whether it makes sense to give a reason for ayin tachas ayin mamish, which is Torah shebechsav. Because what's the Rambam saying? Rambam saying it makes sense to give reasons for Torah shebechsav, despite the fact that Torah Shebal Peh changes the meaning of Torah Shebal Peh, right? And in that context, he says, for some reason which I'm going to tell you, Baal Peh. Okay, so maybe the fact that he's going to tell it in Baal Peh is the key. He's not just saying what Torah Shebal Peh, it's the medium that he's going to tell it to him is somehow the message that there's something about Torah Shebal Peh that we can learn from the fact that I'm going to tell you something Baal Peh, right? That's just a clue. But now I think it sounds like this. In order to preserve something great, we have to mvater on in Bikish Ditapel. As I stated in the letters. So now, right? So the Talmud of the Rambam, Yosef ibn Shimon, he was exposed to this Rambam. By the way, we don't have much from him, from this Talmud, written. We do have a poem. Poem about the Rambam. The Rambam writes, in his letter to him, Rambam writes, I saw your poems. The first exposure Rambam had to this fellow was through his poems. He was famous for his poems, of all things. But, okay, I don't see it here in front of me. But anyways, but we have a poem that he wrote about the Rambam. Here it is. Nisi HaKel, the Rambam is the Prince of God. Shloche Kel lemoifis. Hashem sent him as a moifis. Chol roy of ma'oid olav tmeim. Everyone who sees the Rambam is this ball. When the Chachmei Hazan understand what he's doing, they all get scared. Their thoughts are in the low, are base. While Moshe, the Rambam goes up to God. This is his poem about the Rambam. The Rambam's a moifis. It's like a moifis. So he was exposed to this moifis called the Rambam, and in order for him to function as to live up to his potential of being the one who could preserve this moifis of the Rambam from the inevitable, because I'm predicted, of course, anytime there's a moifis, anytime there's something wondrous, people assume the worst, and they fight. And therefore you need to wait till the Baal HaMoifis, the person who's suspected of base motives, because he's suspected to be like most people, he's going to die. But we need to have this guy who's going, this neutral person. Very important to be neutral. What does it take to be a good Talmud? To learn from my midas. The learning from the midas as a Talmud is what it takes to be the Talmud who's going to preserve the Torah. So what does it take for Moshe, Gibel, Mishneh Torah, Sinai, Yosef, and Yehudah ibn Shimon? It takes that he should keep the midas of the Rav, and in Bizman Hazeh, that means we can't do a Mikish Ditapel. Okay? So now, what does it take for Klal Yisrael, say I, to preserve Torah Shebal Peh? Moshe Gibel Torah Sinai, Yeshua. We have this great thing. This Torah Shebal Peh, which says the Midrashim say that Umas Amakane, Torah Shebal Sa'ad Meil, they could read it. Torah Shebal Peh, we have the secret Torah, we don't tell them. So what does it take? So anti-Semitism, whatever. They're gonna. Meanwhile, we don't have anything against them. Leave us alone. But they assume that we're going to use this Torah Shebal Peh. We use our secrets to harm them. So what do we have to do? So we have to be mevater on ayin tachas ayin mamish. That's what we have to do. So Mela, like this, the fact that the Rambam told him this panim b'panim, and the fact that the Rambam is saying in the Moreh Nevuchim that there's a soid in ayin tachas ayin, which is panim b'panim, is saying like this: it's that ayin tachas ayin momin is momin, not just that Torah Shebal Peh made it into momin. It's in order to be shomer on Torah Shebal Peh. That's why ayin tachas ayin is momin, and that's what he's bringing around us doing, he's saying, I'm going to tell this to you, Peh, because the same way you're my Talmud, panim b'panim, and in order to be a good Talmud, remember I told you something about panim b'panim, which is don't do a mikish ditapel. So too, Gans Klal Yisrael, that was Mekabel the Torah Misin, Moshe Gibel Torah Yeshua, in order to preserve the Torah, which is a dangerous thing because it's going to incite the ire of the haters. So they had to say, you know what, ayin tachas ayin is a wonderful idea. Of course, it makes perfect sense as long as it's rare. Once it becomes the norm, because if someone has something special, then everyone goes and pokes at his eyes, and then you're always fighting back, and then you become a hater too, and it confirms that they're right. So it doesn't work anymore. So that's why ayin tachas ayin is mamin, and therefore it makes sense to give out a reason for ayin tachas ayin mamish, because in principle ayin tachas ayin should be mamish, just in the word, whatever. They have to figure out exactly how that does the place. Okay, but anyways, so that's the Torah. That's what's happening here. So what we learned? We learned that the Talmud was taka very necessary. He was the only one. The Talmud is not just. Now we understand a little bit why he's the only one. He needs someone who's going to really be his Talmud and stelzu to midas too. Ad k'dei kach that this one he seems to at least suffix whether he's living up to it. Maybe he actually didn't. So there's only one person, and he had to first develop him as a Talmud, simply because of this mechanism that whenever you have a good Torah, whenever you have a good idea, people are going to fight with it and try to take it down. And b'chayecha, there's not going to be a lot of Talmidim, maybe one. You have to have one, and this is why you have to have one, because he's the one who's going to bridge. But if he engages with those chevra and confirms that there's what to fight about, then it's just going to be a fight forever, which maybe is what happened. Shkoyach Tavi for making this happen. And that's it.
So,
Okay, let's do questions, yeah.
Because the Goyim don't like when we have Torah Shabbat.
Yeah. So Torah Shabbat Peh is the Metzius of Torah Shabbat Peh necessitates that ayin tachas ayin is mom. So that's the relationship between ayin tachas ayin mom and Torah Shabbat Peh that the Rambam is alluding to by saying there's something about ayin tachas ayin that I'll tell you about Peh, which is to say because there's Torah Shabbat Peh, therefore ayin tachas ayin is mom.
What tense? Over here, it's in this translation it says, seems like usually they Adam Rabbi Allah Hazush, Tushma al
Tushma will be. Tushma means will be. Tushma will be made to be heard. Tushma. No, but it's future. It's something.
Future tense
Yeah.
for them?
Mm-hmm.
That I will tell you, or that
It will be. No. Oh. I see. You're asking. Okay. That's a big question. Whether it's